unconscious, you will still feel the pain. When I found out that I was going to be placed in the tube for nearly 6 months to the farthest reaches of Jupiter, I thought that it sounded impossible. As far as I knew, Musk was the only guy around spending billions to get people to Mars, so deep space exploration wasn't even in the cards in our lifetime, or even our children's lifetime, I thought. Turns out that I was wrong. A sharp jolt to my head had told me that I was being woken by the onboard ship's computer, which by all accounts seemed a little too early until I saw the nearby monitor confirm that we had traveled the necessary distance across the stars. Turning over on my side, I spat up some saliva and blood, my body aching from the dormancy. Before I could get another gasp of air out, one of the onboard robotic guards was behind me with a metallic muzzle, placing it over my mouth roughly like I was supposed to be a caged dog. Considering the circumstances behind my confinement back on Earth, I couldn't blame them. But then I saw that I wasn't being given special treatment. The 7 other passengers for this death cruise to the stars were also being shackled and dragged out toward a command center. Once lined up, all of us got a chance to peer out at the beautiful view of Jupiter and the stars beyond. I wished I could appreciate it. Attention all inmates, we have nearly arrived at our destination, Space Station TXRTS, codenamed the Tartarus. Please listen carefully to the following pre-recorded message from our corporate sponsors. And the intercom computer announced, and then a strange, grindy anthem played over a projected film of the blonde-haired woman that had first approached me while back in Kingsport. Cosmonauts, brethren, you stand on the precipice of new discoveries and truths that no other human has ever imagined. When you left Earth, you were only considered refuse, prisoners to be disposed of by countries that couldn't see your potential. Now you arrive in tandem to prove them wrong. Your mission is simple. Document as much as you can concerning the space station. To do so, your new gear has come equipped with microscopic digital sensors which will automatically feed the data of your search back to the craft. Once we have determined that we have sufficient information concerning Tartarus, your life support systems will be cut off and your mission will be accomplished. Do not attempt to run or hack any of your gear, or termination will occur at any given moment. The video feed cut off and I swore the prisoner next to me was chuckling beneath the mask. It was humorous in a dark way, given that we had all been promised executions on Earth before the launch. I suppose none of us really assumed that a return trip was going to be possible, but hearing confirmation that our only purpose here was to be living cameras for their campaign, it made me feel angry. I thought that I had come to terms with the fact that I was going to spend the rest of my days in a cell paying for my crimes. But having that taken away to play puppet in space for some rich elites, made my blood boil. Next, the computer gave us areas of the station to explore. Mine was labeled as Area D, and the man next to me with the bizarre sense of humor was assigned as my partner. Since we had no ability to speak to one another, I pointed at him and gestured with my hand at the number 2, and then back at myself as number 1. All he did in response was hold up the middle finger and then move toward the first seal where our craft connected to this mysterious station. I had no idea what to expect on the other side, nor any way to voice my concerns with my partner, so the only option was to keep a close but safe distance from each other as the airlock slowly creaked open and the dark corridors beyond came into view. Inside my helmet, a stream of data began to feed its way down in front of my eyes, telling me what the elites had gleaned about this place before our arrival. Codenamed Tartarus Station, so named for the Grecian abyss where the titans of legend were said to be imprisoned by Zeus. This is the first known record of an unknown space orbital of any kind, It is viewed as the first step by our species to contact extraterrestrials. Since its discovery, there has been no indication of any energy signatures or propulsion detected, and satellite imagery has only provided the following details. Size approximately 450 feet. Weight estimated 1.6 million pounds. Shape. The design rivals traditional designs from any known human culture, but popular opinion states that the orbital is similar to the biblical description of angels. Due to this, many suggested that the station initially be named Valkyria. However, the scans soon revealed that it is likely the station has remained unmanned for well over a millennia, which led to the consensus to view it as a prison, a final resting place for whatever species had built it. I couldn't help but think that it was ironic they had chosen to send criminals to such a place, and I wondered how accurate that was for the station's initial purposes. My headlamps kept the corridors illuminated as we had separated from the rest of our team, entering Area D, and I tried my best to make sense of what that purpose might be. Like the idea of being frozen in space, the concept of aliens had been just fantasy to me a week ago. Maybe if I paid more attention in science class about theories relating to this sort of thing, I would know what I was looking at. So many poor choices had led me here, I reflected. It made me wonder what sort of choices this race had made to build this place and then to die out. An alert on my visor told me to stop and allow my built-in camera to take better pictures of some kind of console, and I noticed that there were symbols etched into the display, indications of a language, which I suppose is unsurprising given how sophisticated everything else was. But what did shock me is that a few moments later, my camera feed told me that the computer for our ship had figured out a translation based just on what was there. Analysis indicates this console is a habitat monitor of some kind. Further data of surrounding area needed. My partner grunted for me to shine a light on the larger portion of the room, where we saw what looked like miniature biomes, each self-contained within a hive-like system of metallic pylons. If this was a monitor that was testing the viability of different types of environments for life, perhaps that meant this race had been searching for a new home. The data further revealed that there was a network beneath our feet of intricate wires and equipment that the scans confirmed were once meant to serve as generators. But I doubted anything like that could possibly power up after all this time. Instead of focusing on that query, I decided to follow the nearby corridor to one of the exterior rings for the station, marveling at the design. It appeared that the rings were meant to serve as some sort of perpetual motion, phasing in and out of space around them at rapid speed. It just didn't seem humanly possible, but I had to remind myself that this was a species far beyond our capability. Still, as I climbed one of the rings, I noticed that a lot of the structure reminded me of things that might be found on Earth, which seemed impossible. I've always imagined that the architecture, the way of life, and even ordinary things like doors and windows would be completely different from alien species. Not so here. Maybe that was why our holders were so interested in this place. It wasn't simply about discovery, but exploiting this technology for our own advantage. As a criminal, that was something I could relate to. We are not so different, I thought as a reminder of complying with our instructions had flashed on my screen. I guess that was enough curiosity, I thought as I began to climb down. And just as I was halfway, I heard the most unusual noise. If you've ever fired up an old pickup truck after it's been sitting there for a few months, it was a similar sound except 1,000 times louder, and then the entire ring began to move. It happened so quickly that I lost my bearings and fell to the ground as the noise grew louder. Thanks to the low gravity, the fall didn't cause any injury. As I recovered, I saw the rings move faster and faster, until their movements were so quick that I couldn't even be sure what I was looking at. And then I heard the noise from the habitats and I looked to see that they had activated. Somehow my partner had found a way to spark a flow of electricity from the grid below our feet, the entire pattern glowing brighter than a Christmas tree. Some other portions of the ship began to pull back and shake, the entire thing humming with life, as it seemed to surge stronger and stronger, soon becoming out of control. All the noise made me want to cover my ears, and then I felt blood begin to trickle out of them. Soon we had another problem on our hands. The habitats had begun to spread apart and reveal what looked like a large engine that was thrumming to life. The readout on my helmet alerted all of us to take cover, but it's not like we had anywhere to run. Instead, I could feel the entire station beginning to shake and vibrate as the rings closed in on the central mass and connected to this engine. As the two massive structures collided, I was sure that it would mean our demise would be swift, all of the station splitting apart the way that an atom does at the moment of such a massive explosion of energy. But instead, the room filled with light, and I found myself being flung across the room like a rag doll. Another astronaut hit the exterior ring and went flying, never to be seen again. Moments later, the space station lurched backward and everything began to come to a halt. My head still felt like it was spinning even after the noise had faded away, and my body felt that it had been crushed by 10 tons of bricks. Everything was painful, but I knew something strange and momentous had just happened, so I found the strength to move. When I got over toward the exterior of the viewport, I saw that we were no longer anywhere near Jupiter, nor any stars that I recognized, and the data on my screen was now a dead feed, making me wonder if we had lost the transmissions from the shuttle. At the same moment, another strange noise occurred, and it was accomplished by flashing lights, which I took to mean a warning. Rushing to the other side of the corridor alongside my partner, I saw that our facility was now hurtling toward a new planet at rapid speed. We were going to be experiencing a crash landing. This time I knew that the only way to survive would be to take shelter. I began to climb the honeycomb grid, and getting inside one of the many habitats and sealed it up even as the atmosphere hit the station. Everything around me began to ignite with fire from the chemicals in the environment, and I closed my eyes for the moment of impact. Nothing could have properly prepared me for such a situation. But as the rock and dust and debris crashed all around me, I kept telling myself that I would find a way to survive. And somehow I did. When things had finally settled, the habitat that I had locked myself in had broken from the network and rolled out of the crash site, leaving me to be tangled in a mess of metal and alien foliage. Immediately, I started to kick apart my cage, falling down to the solid ground below and coughing as I tried to recalibrate my entire body. Somewhere close by, I heard a shout of praise and laughter, and then I saw my partner standing near to the edge of the corroded window to the station, his muzzle somehow broken off by the crash. That was intense," he screamed. Two things ran through my mind. First, that he now had the ability to free me, and second, that the planet had breathable oxygen. We were very fortunate. I motioned for him to get my muzzle off, but before he did, we heard noises from under the rubble. A few moments later, we had isolated them and found 3 other survivors, 2 women and another man, and the others of our skeleton crew were nowhere to be found. Over the next half hour, we pushed out of the jungle overgrowth into a spacious valley, and it was there that my partner finally agreed to get our muzzles off. "The fresh air, wow," the woman next to me hollered. Even after it was off my mouth, I found myself still in silence. I was in awe of our surroundings. The valley spread out in all directions with rivers, forests, and vegetation. It was like a depiction of paradise. I explained as I began to settle into the concept that something good could come out of this. "We're quite likely outside the known Milky Way," The second woman, a black girl named Kayla, commented as we started back toward the ruined station. Without any means of communication with our shuttle, that means that our kill command can't transmit properly. We're free, she announced. It was tough coming to terms with the reality at first, maybe because I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would we live here now? For how long? Was returning to Earth even possible? And would we want to return if we had the opportunity? None of those questions could be answered right then and there. So Kayla and the senior of our group, Thomas, made camp near the debris, and we all got to know each other a little bit better. Okay, before we make introductions, I want one thing clear. This shall be tabula rasa, a clean slate. We're not going to discuss any crimes that led us to be incarcerated, only our values and what identifies us. I think it's only fair we take the chance to build something new here, Thomas told us. What do you think that means? Are you saying that we start a whole new life here? Ram, the younger woman, asked. Miguel, the man that had almost died from the entry crash, commented that it was quite likely that no rescue would ever come for us. Oh, Earth is just a distant memory now. For all intents and purposes, we are going to make a colony here, I guess. The man that I had once been partners with, who called himself Zero, chuckled. What's so funny? Kayla asked. Well, if this little new world order is going to be successful, one thing is clear. Somebody's going to have to start shacking up with somebody else. So how do we decide who gets to become lovebirds? Do we draw straws? The uncomfortable silence that followed told me that nobody else had considered that, but it was a valid point. I think we can't make any sort of big decision until we understand more about this world, Thomas told him. It was clear that he felt that he needed to be a leader, perhaps because of his age. So that night, we lay beneath the stars and agreed to remain closer to the debris as we begin to explore the area and learn what we can about the flora and fauna. A whole new world, ours for the taking, I thought, as the night finally allowed me to settle. For the first time since being out here amid the stars, I felt like I could hope again. We chose to expand from the debris of Tartarus after that first night, using what we could from the wreckage as makeshift weapons and cutting down the foliage until we arrived at a wide open field with nothing but green grass and a few trees to see for miles. This place is beautiful, Kayla commented with a whistle. Zero dropped his weapon and let the midday breeze give him a chance to smell the air. Question is, can we live here? He muttered. I'd been wondering the same thing. Our hope of survival depended on finding food, animals, and water. We were lucky to have breathing air, but the chances of not surviving were exponentially higher than making it to see another day. Let's try and have a little faith. It's a miracle that we even made it this far, right? I commented as we started to move again. Miguel had spotted what he thought might be an orchard of some kind. As we got closer and the horizon became clearer, I realized that it was a massive, overgrown garden of trees and flowers, all intertwined together with what looks like metal and vines. And do you suppose the aliens that built that craft came from here, and the Tartarus was their escape to a new world? Miguel wondered. And Thomas cut through the thick layer of weeds that covered one tree and found what looked like prickly pears. Oh, we can wonder about that another day. I think this should be safe to eat. He commented and gestured towards the other fruits nearby. It was a vast field of different kinds, all of which seemed to mostly be rotting except for the ones that he had picked. This ecosystem is so bizarre, the second woman, who I learned was named Blair, had commented as we started a fire and I watched the sky darken. This place feels so empty too, though. I think that we might be the only living things here, I said. And just then we heard something from amid the foliage, and I grabbed my scrap metal to defend the others. Zero emerged with his trousers down from taking a piss and remarked, "I think you all ought to see this." Amid the dense forest, he found a metallic object, large and impaled in one tree. Its strange, twisted blade causing the tree to give off an ethereal glow, and to pulse the way that a heart might. Amid the roots of the tree, I saw what looked like scars, and as I got closer, I realized that they were symbols, resembling the ones that we had seen on the space station. "It looks like your theory was right, kid. So much about this feels so surreal, and yet so familiar," Kayla admitted as we chose to set up camp near the glowing tree. Something about its foliage and fruit seemed different than the rest, as though it was the core of the network and supplying all else. "I've felt that way since we got to the station, really. I know it sounds crazy, but I think these aliens, they might have been connected to our very first ancestors," Thomas remarked. Zero was trying to climb the tree to reach one of the branches that offered the crystalline fruit, and I asked Thomas what he meant, and so he gestured around us before commenting. "Oh, it's like Kayla said. This place, it feels like a distant memory, or a shared dream that anyone can recognize. Something deep inside all of us senses a connection to this place. Don't deny that," he said. He was right, but the fact scared me. It seemed impossible. Humans have only just barely started understanding space travel. All of the things that we saw on that station, and even this biologically advanced plant life, it's light years ahead of our current tech, I commented. "I'm not trying to say that I fully grasp it either, but I feel certain that this place holds answers to some of our deepest truths, the very origins of our species," he said. Just then, Zero tossed a glowing fruit down to Blair and then one to me. "Oh, sounds like mumbo jumbo to me. I've read my Bible and I don't remember it ever saying God made man and then sent him to Earth," he remarked. "Oh, so you're a preacher now, are you?" Kayla said with a chuckle as she tried to get a bite of it. The exterior of the fruit was harder than a rock. "Oh, I got as far as Genesis," he retorted, which caused a few chuckles. I stared at the fruit, a thought forming as I remembered some of those stories myself. My grandma used to read a book of Bible tales right before bed. The stories of creation and the first sin had always been one of my favorites, so the scriptures stuck in my head. And then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image." I mumbled as I stood up and looked at the sword-like tree and the overgrowth around us. "What's gotten into you?" Miguel asked. "The Lord took man and placed him in the garden," I responded and pointed at the tree. "And from every tree of the garden you should eat, but from the tree in the middle of the garden you must not eat. For in the day you eat from it, you will positively perish." Zero laughed aloud. "I think you're taking things too serious, man. That crash must have jostled your noggin. No, don't you see? This is the Garden of Eden," I said excitedly as I looked at the fruit. "And this must be the tree of life, the one that God sealed off when mankind became sinful." Kayla paused from trying to break apart the fruit. Slow down. Are you really saying you think this is the real Garden of Eden? I mean, we're literally millions of years from Earth." "I didn't see it at first, but now, I think it's undeniable. The shared experience of a common ancestry, the familiarity even though none of us have been here. Our theories might be right. This may be where the first man and woman came into existence," I told them. Zero finally broke open the fruit. It looked like a swirling mass of worms that was eating itself over and over again, and it was an even brighter light than the tree. "Let's say you're right. If so, then God was actually some alien race. Wait, where's this God now?" I didn't have an answer, but none of us were sure what to do now. Except Zero. He bit into the worms and let them slither into his mouth. "What the heck are you doing? You don't know what that could do," Miguel shouted. "No, I'm testing the theory that Adam here just spouted. If this is the tree of life like you claim, that means it'll make me immortal with just one bite." He took his weapon, and before any of us could object, he ran the sharp end of the blade right along his belly. The blood seeped out for a moment as all of us watched and waited to see if he would topple over from shock. But instead, the skin began to seal back almost instantly, the way that you might see in the movies. The wound was gone and there wasn't even a scar. "My goodness," Blair whispered. "So then it's like the cure for cancer, influenza, and the plague all in a single dose?" Kayla asked. "Death itself won't be able to touch us," Thomas said, and then he asked Zero to climb up and get some for the rest of us. A few moments later, we all had one and got to work breaking them apart. Once we were done, all of us had decided to eat together. "On the count of 3, Miguel suggested. And on 3, we devoured that fruit. And then we all took turns, much like Zero did, putting the fruit to the test. It was a bizarre sort of ritual that reminded me of a college frat party that I had been kicked out of once. We kept pushing our limits for the rest of the night, laughing at the newfound power that we had gained. Oh, I wish that moment had also been eternal, because what came after was the real nightmare. Our descent into madness was a gradual one. I wish it was something that I could have seen hints of, but that is not how it spreads. As the days passed, we began to work and create a small home for ourselves, which we called New Eden. And eventually we began to create farms and roadways that spread outward from there. Miguel and Blair grew closer as the weeks passed by, working side by side. And I remember the first big milestone was when they announced that they were going to try and have a baby. I imagined that child growing and having children of its own, free of sickness and death, until one day, this whole world was filled with perfection. If anything was going to be a utopia, it would be the one that we were now making. Over the next week, however, Blair experienced the early stages of pregnancy, morning sickness and dizziness, and even had difficulty moving around. And then in the second week, I realized that she had begun to show signs of a bulging stomach, something that ordinarily wouldn't happen until the 3rd trimester. "We need equipment to figure out what's happening. Do you suppose anything on the Tartarus might be of use?" Thomas wondered. I didn't have an answer, but Kayla and I agreed to look the next day. And that night, her pain got more severe. The baby inside her was growing at a much faster rate than she could handle. At one point, when her screams woke me, I saw it stretching her skin to its near breaking point. But because she kept healing over and over, it would never actually break through. Kayla gave her something that we had found which seemed to work as a sedative, and it gave me a concerned look as our friend finally fell asleep. And then we both sat in silence and looked at her distressed eyes, and I found myself wondering if this was the price that we would all pay. And the next day, as we searched the debris of the craft, Kayla told me that she was worried too. "She won't be able to die from this, but it'll be a living hell, and that will be far worse. She'll be begging for death," she said as her eyes welled up with tears. "There's gotta be a way to help her. Zero has been scouring further and further to the west of the rivers, near those mountains we thought might house old facilities. If we can't find anything here, I'm sure that he will there," I told her. "Well, what if he doesn't though? What if she's doomed to just keep on experiencing this suffering forever?" I knew that she was also equally worried about her own future, but I stayed quiet. I didn't have the answers anyway. Blair's screams didn't stop until the middle of the night. When I went to go see why, I only discovered more terror. Zero was standing over her with a large rock and had smashed her face in, enough where it would take a few hours for the fruit that we had eaten to make her recover. I couldn't even find a reason to be angry when I saw what her unborn child had done to her body. It was tearing against her skin, trying to break free, and it had even gotten to the point of breaking her back. "We have to find a way for it to be free," he said. "I'm not proud of what we did, but as we aided in its release, the creature's head finally burst out, its head bulbous and its voice shrill with anger and pain. Dear Lord," I said as Zero disposed of it, the poor beast finally silenced. "We've only delayed our problems." Zero wiped sweat and red from his brow, tossing the rock aside. "Come with me. There's something that I want you to see." I asked him where we were headed as we left camp, but my guide remained silent, the sun rising over our new colony a few hours later as we left anything that I was familiar with. Most of the world around us was uncultivated soil, and Zero had been searching for something that might give us insight on what went wrong all those ages ago, when our ancestors also ate from the tree. Finally, we arrived at a valley where I saw a structure that was about as tall as the sky itself. It was broken and dismantled, having fallen from the East Canyon above us, but it was still a marvel to behold such an immense skyscraper. "I give you Babel, or at least, that's what it appears to be anyway," he told me as we got over the next set of rocks. I vaguely recalled the biblical legend. It was a place where supposedly God had mixed up all the languages. Inside the empty tower, we saw endless arrays of computers, machines, and other forms of technology that rivaled anything that we had ever seen, and it too reminded me of the Tartarus. Zero reached one of the terminals that still had an ethereal glow to it and explained, "I found it a few days ago. It activated when I shed blood." He paused and cut his hand to let the blood flow into the circuitry, and I watched as a holographic man appeared. He was tall, perhaps at least 9 feet, and had the appearance of a regal officer, but his features looked troubled. And as he spoke in an unknown tongue, Zero said, "And this is where I need help. Can't make sense of anything they say." I started checking the computers, using my rudimentary methods from before our arrival to hack into the system. It was a bit archaic, but it worked. Soon the projector started to change its format into a different language, and then another, and then another. Finally, we could listen to what it had to say. "Our species has reached its zenith with this new discovery, the one thing that we lacked, the one thing that can give us purpose. The research team of Colony 1 disagrees with these findings, hence the motive behind their attack. However, if we're ever going to leave this place and spread our seed into the universe, then we must be successful," the man said. It revealed detailed schematics of the Tartarus, which confirmed that this was how our ancestors had made it to the stars. "The ship shall be the ark that saves our species. Once we have traveled the length of a generation, we shall have all connection to this place purged thanks to the virus that we have crafted. Flooding our bodies with this much intense infection will of course have a secondary effect, erasing our immortality." The next bit of the hologram showed what I could only assume was the dispersal of the virus into the atmosphere as they left the planet. The feed showed every single thing on the planet would be consumed and eventually rot and die. "The apocalypse protocol that we've crafted is a secondary backup in case we fail, to ensure that this never happens again. If anybody else discovers this world and what we did here, this will be their salvation." The recording ended and it showed the Tartarus again. this time with different schematics that explained where the super virus was kept, and Zero commented, "And we need to find that. It's the only way to be free of those things that Blair had given birth to." Outside the tower, we heard a howl across the plains, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. That creature was recovered, and possibly it was moving from the colony to find us. We had to act fast. The orbital is about a day's journey from here. "Let's go," I told him. And we left those ruins and started traveling east, my heart pounding each step of the way as we avoided any trace of the creature. We were nearly in the clear when I heard it moving through the brush. Zero and I began to run, weaving between trees and overgrown fields to reach the orbital. But the creature was faster. It leapt from the trees and latched onto Zero, its fingernails tearing into his back as it pinned him down. I stumbled and held my breath as the gigantic newborn shrieked and attacked him, its misshapen features a testament to what the newborn power had done to human biology. Its misshapen features a testament to what the newfound power had done to human biology. It had to be twice his size and against 4 times as strong. Zero kept fighting though, screaming for me to run as he distracted it. His bones were breaking over and over again as the two danced around the jungle, each trying to overpower the other. The distraction, I knew, wouldn't last forever. With that sort of strength, eventually Zero would be wounded beyond a quick recovery of healing. So I decided to leave him behind as I reached the edge of the jungle and saw the Tartarus off in the distance. I didn't look back as Zero's screams became more intense. And then at last it grew silent, which actually frightened me even more. That meant that Zero was unconscious, and the creature was likely now hunting me. Reaching the station, I pushed myself through the debris and began to search what portions of the place were not destroyed. I saw my old helmet, which we had once considered to be a part of our inmate uniform, and I turned on the headlamp illuminating my steps. As I started to roam, I found my thoughts reflecting on our journey here. We thought that we could escape fate, escape death. This was never freedom at all. We wished that we could have simply perished a long time ago, amid the safety of stars that we recognized. The Tartarus simply had to still have access to the virus, otherwise I wasn't sure what we were going to do. Climbing down an old elevator shaft, I reached a submerged portion of the station and recognized these symbols on the outside to indicate that it was some sort of lab. I dove under the water and pushed myself into the room, adjusting my vision to the cloudy water as I tried to see if anything was intact. I grabbed whatever I could, pushing myself into the next corridor and coming up for air. Placing the vials on the side of the twisted metal, I examined the materials inside each of them. I really only had one way to make sure the virus was actually effective. I realized it taking out a syringe. I couldn't bring back the wrong thing. So I braced myself and plunged it into my thigh. Gasping for air, I felt my heart suddenly stop, and then it felt like it was going to explode. The world didn't stop spinning for a good second, and when it did, I found my entire body was shaking and convulsing. I turned over and began to vomit bile, along with the rest of the worms that I had consumed years ago, and then I simply laid there on the metal, still gasping for air as I struggled to move. My hand cut against the sharp ends of the metal as I got up and pulled back in pain, noticing that the wound did not heal. The injection must have already started to reverse the process of immortality, I thought as I got up on my feet. I searched for another exit, and I found an elevator shaft to my right, tilted and running straight into one of the massive trees. Somewhere above me, I heard the newborn monster scream, and I hastened to climb up and out. Without protection, I'd be dead. Squeezing in between some of the branches and the hole in the wall, I found that I could barely breathe, and then my foot got stuck. I panicked and twisted it, trying to get it loose as I heard the shrieks get louder. And then I saw its silhouette at the top of the elevator, and the gruesome infant started crawling toward me. I barely got my foot out and tumbled down the tree as I heard it leap. My lungs released all of their air as I hit the ground, and I laid there paralyzed in just a moment. The creature stared at me, and I started to climb down faster. I grabbed a few rocks and chucked them at the monster as I got on my foot. My body ached and my muscles spasmed, the effects of the virus running its course as I became mortal again. The newborn attacked and we tumbled down a hill. I used my fingers to poke its eyes, and the beast reared back and hollered, giving me a chance to run free. I saw a river and I immediately jumped into it. The creature didn't follow, trying to find its way around to where I swam. I wasn't sure why it hesitated, but I used the momentum of the stream to push away, focusing on the rising sun. If I followed this path, I should be only 10 minutes from the camp. The screaming behind me didn't stop, and so I kept my pace and followed a fresh path of destruction, eventually finding Thomas and Kayla and Blair. "What's happening? Where's Zero?" Kayla asked. I showed them the vials to explain what the virus did, making them all quiet as they heard what I had to say. "So this virus, it's death, going back to being mortal?" Thomas asked me carefully. Blair was already eager to take the medicine, her ordeal with the newborn enough to make her desperate to die. They watched as she injected herself and began to convulse the way that I had, and then she gave us all a hug and smiled at me at last. She told me thank you. We watched in silence as she went to the nearest cliff and she hurled herself off of it. There was a sudden finality to our long ordeal when we saw that she had perished, and Thomas bravely said that before we took each other out, we had to make sure that this planet was destroyed. "The apocalypse protocol you mentioned, how do we activate that?" he asked. I told him about the tower and how it likely once served as a means of communication with the station, and so we left the camp immediately to get there. The tower was at least a day away, and I knew that the creature Blair had given birth to was still searching for us, so there wasn't any time for rest. Even though I was the only one in the party that could now get hurt, I became even more vigilant. Nothing else mattered to me except finally getting to destroy this wretched rock. It began to storm as we passed through the first portion of the valley, our sweat and blood staining the air. The predatory newborn was close. When we saw the tower, I insisted that they go ahead. "If I can distract it, you'll have time to activate the tower." The command center was close to the level where the canyon had crushed the skyscraper. "How will you know if we succeed?" Kayla asked. I thought about the video where I saw the destructive power of the bomb detonating across the entire planet, and I promised her that I would know. "Once the signal can be sent out, we will all meet our maker," I told her. And they left me there as I caught my breath again, and I waited for the creature to find me. I didn't just sit by though, I set a trap. One of those makeshift holes that you might find to catch a tiger. It would be enough to slow it down, maybe even enough for my friends to get that signal working. There is also an alternative that I'm dreading where everything goes wrong and they can't actually destroy this world. In that case, I'll fling myself into this pit and let nature take its course. The only way out is death. It was the answer that we were given all along. It just took living forever to recognize how precious living is. The creature came like I knew it would, and I smiled, weapon in hand, as I saw the beacon starting to light up. This is the end for me, but maybe if this message it gets back to somebody else and it's not, I only ask that you send others here to kill us. to put an end to all of this. If not for our sakes, then to prevent this curse from ever spreading. Goodbye.